I took office the 1st of January 1995.
So you basically were here at the time the monument was declared.
The monument was declared on September the 18th, 1996. And yes, so I'd been a commissioner almost 2 years.
So when news came back that a monument had been declared, what was your first reaction as a county official?
Well, about like everyone else, we felt like we'd been stabbed in the back. You know, not just on a county level or even a state level, but that hurt our whole nation, Chad. That was a big thing. That declaration of that designation of that monument tied up so many things and hurt us. Maybe we'll never will recover from it. You know, the billions of tons of coal that was locked up on the Kaparowitz, and coal south of south of Tropic and east of Henryville, a place called Coal Canyon. I know of a fellow that had mining claims in that area. Said he knew of a seam of coal down there 27 feet thick, and that runs all the way to Johns Valley north of here and up to the forest line. And so it was a devastating blow to the whole area.
So basically, President Clinton kind of intimated that nothing would really change for ranchers, for timber, for transportation, recreation. The only thing that he said is, well, we can't take coal out of every place. What kind of promises did they make that said your life would be normal? What did they say to you at the time the monument was created? Obviously, you couldn't take coal out, but what did they say they would?
Well, that everything would remain the same, that we wouldn't lose any rights or privileges that we had at that time. And of course, everything changed immediately, and the monument managers, the roads were a big issue. Roads almost immediately became, a number of them, they were attempting to close them, which they did. Grazing was affected. It just so happens that my son and I owned grazing permits on the monument, both winter and summer, and that was affected big time, you know. But the roads were a big issue. The 2477 roads were, we began immediately fighting over them, and in fact, it was from the pressure from Garfield County commissioners that forced the monument people to even put roads into their monument management plan. So, but it was a big issue.
So, 20 years later, as we're sitting here looking, as eastern Utah is now facing a monument, how big of an impact did the monument make on grazing, as an example? How much access has been cut off on the monument that used to be open for people to collect firewood, for people to graze, to get around up there? I want to kind of quantify it.
Well, you mentioned firewood. There's a huge area we call West Bench, the BLM calls it Horse Flats, in the Wallweep area on the monument, and hundreds, probably thousands of acres of land that had been railed earlier on, that just millions of tons of wood out in that area has been completely locked up. You can't drive out there anymore and get it. Well, in fact, you can't gather wood anywhere except, as I remember, there was about 2 areas on the monument you could still gather wood. And so that was affected directly and immediately. There's areas there that people mined just decorative rocks, flat rocks, you know, for patios and such, and those things were shut down. And the grazing itself, we weren't really hurt, as I remember, by the by the designation, except the closing of roads, and of course there were permits that were reduced, but it was a devastating thing, and I feel for those people in San Juan County now, but it's a wonderful thing, though. Maybe I can add this in our discussion, that I feel so excited about things now in comparison to 20 years ago. Immediately after this monument was declared in San Juan County, I noticed on the news where Attorney General Reyes, backed, of course, by our governor, who was a great guy and a good friend, and they're going to bring lawsuit against the federal government for the creation of the monument in San Juan County. When the Grand Staircase monument was created, we didn't have any support at all, Chad. We had nothing. I mean, the counties were left hanging out there, and we weren't wealthy enough to fight the fight. But it's 100% different right now.
So the people who have argued for this said that and on Bears Ears they say you don't need to do mining, you don't need to do oil and gas development, which doesn't, I mean, your oil and gas is the coal. You don't need to do this stuff here because tourism will take over and run your economy. Did that promise pan out?
That promise is as flat as it can be. The Grand Staircase probably generates very little, contributes very little to our economy. Now, I know that, well, consider a person back east, perhaps Pennsylvania or Ohio or wherever, and they're planning a trip out west to see the wonders of the West, the national parks and what have you. They're not sitting down with a map and checking it out and say, oh boy, we're going to go visit the Grand Staircase. I think what most of the people that visit the Grand Staircase, except those that travel Highway 12 to get from one place to another, but those that penetrate into the monument itself are, I think, pretty minimal.
Do you have any idea how many miles of roads the monument closed? How much of your transportation system was affected?
No, I don't really have that. But they've closed some. They've made it hard for deer hunters to move around in that area, and it hasn't been all that they claimed that it would. I recently retired Commissioner Della Fever and I, several years ago, sat down with a map of the Grand Staircase. We did this 2 different times, and I know you're familiar with the country, so maybe those people that have a chance to view this, some of them will know too, but we sat down, we drew a boundary, made the boundary around something that we thought would be livable. Mm-hmm. And it included, okay, north and east of Escalante, there's 25,000 acres of wilderness that's already been designated Box Death Hollow. So we incorporated that into our boundary, went over the Hog's Back and down, included those canyons east, and then back to the west and down head of the rocks, took in all of Calf Creek, and then down both sides of the Escalante River to the National Recreation Area boundary. And then our proposal was to create a new monument out of that, and then release the rest of it to multiple use. And that would release all those billions of tons on the Caparowitz and all the natural gas and everything that could be developed on what is now the Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument.
What effect does this have on Watershed? The monument. That, I mean, when they were leading up to it, I had a chance to talk to a geology professor from Utah State University, and when I brought up the grand staircase, he said, you know, I worked on that. And I said, you did? And he said, yeah, the federal government hired us. I spent a whole summer down there. And they wanted to protect watersheds, and so we would go down there and we would survey these things. And I said, so how did that go? And he said, it drove us crazy, because every time we tell them where the boundaries should be to protect the watersheds, they change them.
Yeah.
And we look at it and say, these aren't protecting watersheds at all. And so I guess you know, I'm wondering if have the regulations on the monument been a lot stricter than BLM previously, as far as thinning out PJs and you know, improving habitat out there? Has it been a lot more hands-off?
Oh yeah, in fact that's a good point. They did eliminate the removal of PJs on the monument. Now I understand down east of Kanab they have released a couple areas down there to where they're allowing that to happen now. So maybe things have changed somewhat, but yeah, that did happen, and that so that was a big thing at that time, that there's no more chaining or removal of PJs on the monument.
So basically, until what, 2 years ago, you served as a commissioner in this county, and
yes,
and the county was promised that the monument would be the best thing that ever happened to Garfield County. So, not wanting to steal a line from Ronald Reagan, my last question for you is, are you better off today than you were 20 years? Is your county better off today than it was 20 years ago?
well, absolutely not. We've lost, and we can't perhaps blame it on to the creation of the monument, but it hasn't done the good to Escalante over in the eastern part of the county, or at least the center of the county. They've lost workers over there, students. Their schools are, their class sizes are down to a minimal, and so no, it hasn't brought us the benefits, near the benefits that was promised at the time. And we know, we all know that those that have been involved in the thing all know why it was created, and that was a secret deal and backroom deals that President Clinton did, and for political reasons. And he did with the coal. Coal was the big thing. They just simply wanted to tie up all the coal that they possibly could, and I just hope. I am so excited, Chad, about the possibilities that's facing their commissioners right now. We've got some great commissioners, and I know they're going to be all over this thing, because they have the opportunity right now with the new administration coming in, and you get the right Secretary of Interior. And how about this, if Representative Mike Noel, who I understand is in the running to become the BLM director back in Washington, D.C., I can see the possibility of solving all the 2477 road issues and eliminating WSAs and knocking this grand staircase monument back down to the size that it ought to be, and hopefully eliminating the Bears Ears monument in San Juan. I mean, I am just excited as I can be.
Okay, so I will ask you one more question and we'll be done. What advice do you have if the monuments don't go away? What advice do you have for San Juan County and their residents and communities to prepare themselves best for what lies ahead if nothing changes?
Well, I think to go to battle, first of all, to try and reduce that thing down to a reasonable size. I've never been there, so I don't know the area that well, but if it's similar to what we went through, there are so many hundreds of thousands of acres that have been designated that are not unique. So my advice is to don't give up the fight, and maybe with the administration we're dealing with now, they can bring that down to size. If there are areas that need to be protected that they feel like are that important, look at some ACECs and protect those areas that need to be protected. And Chad, one thing that excites me so much also is our Attorney General willing to take this to court, and I hope it goes clear to the Supreme Court. I've said this for 20 years. I've read the Antiquities Act 2 or 3 times, and I know I'm not a lawyer, but I can find nothing in the Antiquities Act that gives a president the authority to create that size of a monument. In the Antiquities Act, it's mentioned, objects are mentioned, objects that need to be protected. And I can't quote it exactly, but there's a place in the Antiquities Act that says, in no case shall it be bigger in area, any bigger than what is necessary to protect the objects that need to be protected. To me, that don't cover a 1.5 million acre monument.
How, on a percentage basis, how big a percentage of this monument do you think is actually unique?
The one that bears ears, or the grand?
No, this, yours.
Well, the one that we, I love it all. I mean, there's some beautiful places down there, but there's hundreds of thousands of acres that is just pinyon and juniper and sagebrush flats and so forth. In the area I was telling you about, that Del Lefebvre and I circled at the boundary for the thing, I suppose that, I can't remember of course it would need tweaking, but I suppose that was probably less than 100,000 acres. And that's out of a monument of 1.9 million. So that's what we thought was an area that perhaps needed to be, and would be great if you had it. And call it the Canyons of the Escalante National Monument, and what a wonderful thing that would be.
I suppose if you really were adamant about it, you could make 2 monuments and maybe include the Smoky Mountain area down in Kane County as a separate monument. But
That's a possibility, and certainly that, you know, I'm sure the people would accept that, but there is so much of the monument, this grand staircase, that, like I say, that isn't unique at all. I mean, you can go to any state in 11 western states of the United States and find country like that, from Washington to Oregon, California, Arizona, New Mexico. You can find country like that anywhere that is absolutely not unique. But there are those Slick Rock Canyons and Red Rock areas over east of Escalante and north that are very beautiful and probably not worth anything for anything else. So that would make what we thought would be a real addition, and something that you could be proud of and be unique, and free up the rest of it to multiple use. And I think that would be a win-win situation.
so the critics of well, pro-monument people have said that your life is going to be much better with a monument. And they say that if they hadn't made a monument, your communities would have deteriorated anyway. In your mind, just knowing what kind of resources you were on top of, how different would Garfield County be today if they hadn't declared a monument, in your opinion?
In my opinion, I know that this is a fact, Chad. After the designation of the monument, we got stuck in the back further on the trade outs of the state section in the monument. Not 2 months before those state sections were traded out of the monument, we had a delegation, I guess you'd call it, that was interested in drilling and producing natural gas that was on the monument. But what they were represented there by Connie Brooks. You know her probably, out of Denver, and they were looking for our support, which we gave it to them, to go on the monument and block in, excuse me, a number of state sections down east of the Coxcomb, in which they were going to drill for natural gas and start production right away. And so that was all wiped out, and I know that this monument has hurt our county economically like we can't even comprehend. Zirconium, there's all kinds of zirconium out south of Escalante. So